And then I just remember driving and I didn't know where I was, and all these cops, every street I go, there's like another cop, another cop, another cop. I'm like, oh my God, I need to stop. This is bad. And I turned down like one dead end and I'm like, it's a fucking dead end. So I turn around again. I almost like hit a cop car as I'm turning around. And I went like, this is the kind of person I was even in my addiction. I look at him, I go, sorry. Like, I'm like, sorry. Like I almost hit you.
All right, Jessy.
Hi.
Jessy, where are you from originally? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Agora Hills. For the most part, I was born in LA with my mom and my sister and my dad, and then they divorced when I was 5, and then I moved to New York for like 1 year, and then into Ohio for like 4 years, and then to Agora Hills, which is where I landed and stayed in 5th grade. So I moved around a lot, but originally I'm from Los Angeles.
You're a Valley girl.
Yeah.
Tell me about your family growing up.
My dad is Persian, very conservative, wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer or a pharmacist, like hates tattoos, you know what I mean? But the most loving, wonderful father. Like I am so blessed to have him. He truly is like I'd be lucky to find a man like him, you know? My mom is the polar opposite, not like, she's just not Persian. She's like this white hippie from New York. And yeah, it's crazy. She's an artist.
How did they get together?
How did they get together? They met at like a party when they were younger, yeah, and they hit it off.
Opposites attract.
Yeah, and yeah, she was like a free spirit and just like such a loving, wonderful mother. And yeah, they didn't last too long because they got divorced when I was 5. But I have one younger sister, Chelsea, and yeah, my mom, my sister, and I, we lived in New York and Ohio, and we were like the 3 Musketeers. That's what we called ourselves.
How would you describe your childhood in general?
It was good. I mean, I don't really have any bad memories from my childhood. I remember being with nannies a lot because my mom was a full-time career woman. Like she had worked high-end like corporate jobs. So my sister and I were left with like nannies a lot. And but you know, I do have like memories of being in Ohio with like a white picket fence, like front porch, white Christmases, like just like the cookie cutter childhood dream, you know. I didn't see my dad as much as I would like. I did see him in the summer times, you know, but I did feel that estrangement like on my heart, you know. But I did have a stepdad who came into my life very young, and at the same time I had a stepmom on my other side and a stepsister. So we have this big, beautiful blended family. Yeah, but my childhood was good for the most part. I don't really have any traumatic memories. The first traumatic memory that I do have happened when we did move back to California. I was in 5th grade. No, I wasn't in 5th grade, sorry. I always say that. I was in 9th grade. Big difference. My papa, my mom's father, died in our house on Christmas Eve, and it was like when we were getting ready to go to church. We were cooking dinner, and you know, he had a heart attack on the kitchen floor, and we had to like help try to revive him. And that was my first traumatic memory as like a teenager.
And he did pass away?
Yeah, he passed away.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
so Christmas was not the same for a long time, you know. Yeah.
And you graduated high school?
I did. Yeah, I was really good at living like a double life through high school. Like I was partying a lot in high school. I was drinking and smoking. I had this period where I'd go to Raves every weekend, take ecstasy, and that's where I like really felt like I found my home, was in the rave scene, just like being on ecstasy and like feeling like seen and loved by everyone around me. It was like where I truly felt like intimacy for the first time. And I think I really needed that at that moment because my mom sunk into a deep depression after her father passed away. You know, her mom, my Nana, had passed away a year before that. So it was like the combination of losing both her parents, like she took it really hard. She was really close with them. So she was in a deep depression. She'd be drinking a lot and like taking Xanax and like suicidal ideations, like just really, really suffered. So at the time, I just wanted to get out of myself.
You say you feel you found intimacy for the
first? Intimacy. Like
with who?
Well, I had a boyfriend in high school that I was like infatuated with.
At a rave, intimacy would be with everybody, right?
Yeah. So like he and I would go to these raves, and then we had a couple of close friends, and it became like a little posse that would go to the raves. And you just meet strangers there that like treat you like their family. So in that way, that's what I meant, like intimacy. Like I would make bracelets to meet, the girls next weekend and trade them with them. And yeah. I had like my little rave name, Persian Kitten.
Soft White Underbelly is about giving people a space to tell their stories, even when these stories challenge what we think we know. Ground News shows us different perspectives in the media, which is why Ground News is a perfect sponsor for my channel. In a world where algorithms censor much of the information we receive, some of the most important stories get missed from our news feeds. Ground News highlights local news from around the world, giving you an on-the-ground perspective that national coverage might miss. The app and website empowers you to form your own opinions by presenting you with every article published on any news story worldwide. My favorite part of the app is the data it gives you on each news source as you read it, such as where it leans on the political spectrum, a factuality rating indicating how subjective their printed reporting tends to be, and who funds it. I particularly like their blind spot feed, dedicated to showing you news stories that are underrepresented in the mainstream media. You can check this all out by scanning the QR code on screen or clicking the link below. It's easy to forget how much bias can shape the reality we live in. And in a world where our attention is constantly being fought over, my Vantage plan easily helps me keep up with more important stories slipping through the cracks. So I encourage you to check them out at ground.news/SWU. Subscribe through my link or download the mobile app and enter promo code SWU to save 40% off their Vantage plan. And by subscribing or even gifting it to someone you know, you're helping hold the media accountable and helping my channel directly. Thank you for watching. How old were you?
So that was like when I was 15. And then my mom found out about that. I didn't last too long in the rave scene. She found out and I got grounded for a while, and then I just decided to clean up my act, and I was like, I'm just going to do coke instead, And so I just would do cocaine and drink, and I was getting good grades. Like I said, like I lived this double life really well. And then I ended up going straight from high school to Cal State Northridge after that.
And still using?
Yeah, I was still using, and it was progressing pretty quickly at this point. I now had started using oxys and like Roxys, and I was smoking them off oil, and I decided to, go study abroad in Rome for a month. And that was the first time I left everything behind. I'm like, I didn't think I had a problem. I didn't really know what to expect. But I get over to Rome and I'm trying to go to orientation and do all the things that are needed. I'm in a foreign country. I don't know the language. I don't know anyone there. I have roommates that I just met for the first time, and I'm like going through this like cold turkey detox, and I'm like, what the fuck is happening? Yeah, it was gnarly, but I ended up staying the full month. I ended up flying back and forth from Rome to Toronto 3 times that month because I was dating someone in Toronto, and they had the Oxy 80s out there and the Roxys, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna go visit him. But looking back, I was just fueling my addiction, and like I saw a way of, getting the medicine I needed at the time. Yeah, so I did that, and I came back, to California, and
Were you a functional student? Functional addict
No,
student?
well, I guess that depends on like what your version of functionality is. I ended up not making it to my classes, but I've had a pattern of like things just working out for me. Like one professor was just like, look, you don't need this class. It was like an art class, and I was there for my minor in business marketing. So he said, just don't come to class. You'll be fine. It's not going to make a difference. I don't really know how that happened, but it didn't affect my grade. And then the other class, which I did need, which was for my business minor, the professor was like, look, I know there's something going on with you. Just turn in a paper at the end, and I understand. I'm like, okay.
You have some very understanding teachers.
Yeah, so I just ended up touring Rome and getting drunk, and then doing pills, and then being sick, and then going to Toronto. It was craziness. Like, I don't have much or many memories in Rome sober. Yeah. And then when I got back, my parents, they're like, you need to go to rehab. They had found out that I had been getting tons of prescription pills from this dirty doctor because I was using my insurance to pay for it. It was like Oxys and Somas and Adderall and Xanax and Valium and Suboxone, which didn't make sense, but he threw that one in there too.
Your parents seem pretty understanding?
They weren't at the time. No, they were scared. You know, my dad's brother was an addict his entire life. You know, it had eventually killed him. He died a few years ago, but you know, his entire life, my dad tried to save my uncle from his addiction and all the troubles that he put the whole family through. So I think my dad was like full of fear because of dealing with that. My mom, she was just scared, you know. It's a helpless feeling when someone you love is struggling with addiction and they're not ready to see that or face that. There's only so much the parents can do and the family can do. And it's, you know, my parents took it on extremely codependently and heavy, you know.
Where do you think your addiction stemmed from? Was it genetic or was it something you went through?
I ask myself that a lot over the years, and I've done so much work on myself. I think it's a combination. I don't think there's any like actual gene, but it's interesting, right? Because you do see patterns in families, you know, and neither of my parents have any addiction or alcoholism, but they're my uncle, right? And then on my mom's side, I have a couple cousins that have addiction issues. So is it nurture, nature? Is it both? I'm not really sure. I just know that I never thought I was going to be an addict. I used to like look down at people like that when I was growing up. I had big dreams and...
So sometimes you're the one that stepped in the quicksand.
Yeah. And I used to be like, oh, people that shoot up, that's disgusting. You have to be at such a low point in your life to do that, you know? And then one day I'm doing it. And like all the things that I said I wouldn't do, I did. And I like would draw a line in the sand a little bit more. And I would cross it and I'd double back. And
what do you think people that don't do drugs don't understand about addiction?
I think they don't understand like the helplessness of it all when you're in it. Like when I remember being like in my addiction, trying to get sober but not ready, the cravings and the insanity, it's overwhelming. It's intoxicating. Like you cannot escape it. And I feel like that's what a lot of normies, I guess, who don't have any knowledge or family members, they you know, they don't understand it to that degree of how overwhelming it is. And like I knew what it was doing to my family. Like I knew I was hurting my family, and that's why I tried to go to rehab so many times, but it was just like out of my control. Like I literally felt like I was possessed by another person. It was an internal battle all the time. Like good Jessy, bad Jessy. Like should I leave the rehab? No, stay. You know what I mean? Like it was like a constant fight. You know, and to have that obsession lifted has been the greatest gift. And that's what eventually made me believe in a higher power, because I never thought it would go away. I thought I was going to be trapped like that forever.
Was self-worth a part of this situation?
Yeah, you know, I have struggled with self-worth a lot over the years. It's interesting because a lot of people wouldn't think that. They're like, oh, you care so much about your image and this and that. And I'm like, yes, but that's different. Like, it's different than feeling worthy. And I think a lot of times I just felt like I had to prove my self-worth with men or, you know, with certain friends. Just like, I didn't like myself very much growing up, and I felt like
join the club.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's common.
Yeah. Yeah. Who does like themselves growing up? I'm sure there's people out there, but you know, until I found myself. Now I do love myself now.
And then people look at somebody like you and think, oh, of course she's full of herself and she thinks she's awesome. But the truth is, like in your 20s, probably you're just still struggling to figure out who you are and how to like yourself.
Yeah, and I was always very critical of myself. Like, you know, I didn't like how I looked for a long time. I have this like Persian nose that I hated, and I still to this day go back and forth. Like, I want to get a nose job. Should I not get a nose job? You know what I mean? Like, it's like I'm always trying to like fix the outside, but really comes from like an internal self-worth. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, after hearing so many of these stories, I've done thousands of interviews. It's like, that's the thing that that's the common thread that I hear.
Self-worth?
Yeah, self-worth is always somewhere in the background fucking up our lives. Everybody.
Yeah. So, yeah. Where did I leave off?
I don't know, but your story with drugs.
Okay.
Escalated?
Story with drugs. Yes. So I went to rehab like my parents wanted me to. And I did 30 days. They wanted me to do longer. I was like, I'm cured. And then like the same night I left, I got drunk with one of their techs. And then I ended up, my mom is now living back east again because she had to move around a lot for her job. She worked like I said, she was in the corporate field, but with fashion design. So she would move to wherever the job was located. So now she's working in Manhattan, living in Connecticut, commuting. And I went to go visit her. It was shortly after rehab. And I get drunk at some party with my friend that lived in New York. And I'm like, I want to get some oxys, the beast had awoken. And I found someone on Craigslist that said they had oxys. So I go to meet up with this random person, and then I meet up with him, and I'm like, you know what? I heard about heroin in rehab. Like, I want to do heroin now. That sounds better. Not knowing what I was about to get myself into. Like, how naive could I have been? I really thought I was going to be different, that I wasn't going to become an addict in that degree, and that night really, like, it was, I often think about how that night, like, if I had gone this way instead of that way, like the trajectory of my life, because I ended up finding heroin from some random person and went into like a hotel room, and I Googled how to shoot up, and I did it, and I didn't die by the grace of God, and I didn't even like it. It made me throw up everywhere. I couldn't keep down water for days. And I went home and wanted to do more. That's the beast of addiction. It's like, it didn't even feel good, but I couldn't help myself. I wanted to do more.
Do you feel like you would have crossed paths with
probably
opiates anyway?
Yeah.
Even if that hadn't happened that night?
True, right? But I do think, like, what if I had just made that decision that night to really try to be sober? But I just wasn't ready. And I guess, like, this was God's will for me. I had to go down the path I did to get to where I'm at now. Mm-hmm. So yeah, when I went back home, I became an IV heroin user, and then meth got introduced into the pictures, and that was a whole other underworld that came with it. I'm now I'm out of my house. My parents were like, you're gone, because my sister and I were living in our home that we grew up in Agora on our own. It was like our house at this point because my mom had moved back east. And my dad, he lives in a separate house because they're divorced. So I was kicked out of that house, and I'm just like living this crazy life now. I'm living in the back of U-Hauls. I'm living in the back of cars. I'm couch surfing. I'm motel hopping. I'm staying at Airbnbs, like staying at different people's houses. Wherever I could fit, I stayed. And I got involved with some really bad people. And it was interesting, though, because I always felt like I could see the good in some of these people. And somehow I managed to not get myself into too much trouble with people, you know what I mean? Like, I had some scary situations happen. For the most part, though, I was protected, I feel like, by a higher power.
What kind of things were they into?
Everything from running drugs to fraud, sex trafficking, all different types of stuff, And I myself, when I was in my 20s, it was like early on in my addiction, I started working these underground poker games, and I started making a lot of money like that, cocktail waitressing, and I thought it was really cool because there's like all these little underground areas that like you would never know, like right here, over here, you know what I mean? Like up in the hill in some random house or a loft or a warehouse. And I thought it was just fun. I'm like, oh, I'm going to work these games. And I was really good at networking. I would work different games, and I would bring different players to other games. And then someone finally was like, hey, do you want to run my game? Like, you'll be the head girl. You bring in all your own girls. And it was fun. I did that for a while. I had all the girls, my friends, come in, and we had like themed nights and made a lot of money like that. And then eventually I met another person who was like, do you want to run the game with us as a partner? And I was like, that sounds even better. I don't have to cocktail waitress then, So I did that with these two guys, and that didn't last very long because I think I remember them trying to take like an uneven share at the end of the night and not really give me my portion. So the underground poker world was interesting. And through that, I started escorting, and that opened up a whole nother can of worms for me. I truly feel like escorting took a part of my soul at the time, It's where I learned to dissociate, and I really didn't like men at that time anymore, I didn't want anyone touching me. I was in a relationship and I didn't even want my partner near me because of experiencing all the things I did. And in my defense, I thought that, I'm not hurting anyone else by doing this. This is just me paying for my addiction, and I'm not hurting random people this way, But that only lasted so long, and my moral compass started to go lower, and I just didn't care as much anymore because it was destroying me. So I let that part of my life go, and I started making money a different way.
Meaning what?
I got into fraud, which was another thing I said I would never do.
And you stopped with the sex work?
Yeah.
Was the sex work purely a product of the drug addiction?
Yes. Yeah. And I never posted online. I never walked the streets. It wasn't anything like that. It was word of mouth, men that I had met through these games. Yeah. So it was a small clientele. It wasn't like I was just going crazy or anything like that. But it was still enough that it wasn't, it just didn't fit with me.
All you have to be is attractive all you have to be is attractive as a female, and the job is done.
Yeah. Yeah, so I let that part go, and then I got into fraud. And it was interesting because I'd always look down at these people, these tweakers, I'd say, who were doing fraud, and I was like, you guys are horrible. How do you do that to these strangers that do nothing to you, and you're ruining their credit, and you're stealing their money? How could you do that and sleep at night? It's so interesting. I remember saying that, and then down the line, years later, it's me. So I mean by crossing that invisible line, your moral compass gets lower and lower. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I got into that lifestyle, and that was a whole nother ball game. I started getting arrested, and every time I got arrested, I got out easy. I was able to get rehab or probation, and my dad would always get me a private attorney, so I was very blessed in that sense. But it did prolong my addiction, I believe, because I just didn't really feel like I was suffering any consequences. Yeah.
Pretty privileged.
Yeah. That was the only time he would help me, though. He never bailed me out. He was like, I'll get you a lawyer while you're in jail. But he never gave me money. I remember one time I was begging for just $5 for gas money, and he was like, no. My parents did the tough love thing, Al-Anon and tough love, and yeah.
But the courts probably gave you a break sometimes too?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, fraud world was crazy. And I ended up making a lot of money like that, way more than ever with escorting, and at this point, my ex-boyfriend and I, we were living in a nice apartment in Marina Del Rey, and we had a nice car, and we had a puppy, and I had all these material things that I craved for before, and I was because in the past, I'm it's not my addiction making me depressed. It's the fact that I'm homeless. It's the fact that I don't have money. It's the circumstance. And I finally had this spiritual awakening in that moment, because I remember sitting in my apartment, and I'm a 1 minute walk from the beach. I have all the things I wanted. Why am I still miserable? Why am I still feeling so unfulfilled and unhappy? And that's when I realized, this is never going to go away until I get sober. And I was able to surrender a little bit that day with that knowledge, So I just continued to take risks. I was very careless. I think part of me wanted to get caught because I knew that was the only thing that was going to allow me to get help. I didn't have the strength to just walk into rehab again. I had been in rehab at least 13 to 15 times, and none of them worked. I always left, ran away, snuck drugs in. I never took it seriously. And so I knew I had to get caught by the police. So yeah, I just was doing very reckless things. It's like I thought I was like James Bond or something. I would go into banks wearing like nurse scrubs and like long sleeves and like even like a little badge that I would make because everyone's going to trust a nurse.
Sure.
Yeah, and I would go in with wigs and colored contacts to match whoever's ID I'm using, and I would go in there with all this false confidence and withdraw money from their account or, cash checks against their account. I had all these different schemes going, to make money in that field, And, it was
Were you doing things that were outside of your normal ethics?
Yes. I feel terrible about all the stuff I've done. I remember one person in particular, she called me. She got one of the burner numbers I was using, and she called me, and she begged me, can you stop? Please stop. Whoever you are, stop doing this to me. Because she would try to lock her account. Then I would unlock it. I had all these loopholes of how to go around things. And that person in particular, I remember the helplessness in her voice when she was like, please stop. And I couldn't, I was like, in my mind, I was like, they're going to get reimbursed, the banks will pay them back. But that's been a huge thing on my amends list once I got sober and started doing the 12 steps, how to make things right with these people, that I hurt.
What was your drug at the time?
Meth and heroin. So, yeah, I was in they're goofballs when you shoot them. That's what I did for like 16 years. I didn't OD for 16 years. I finally OD'd at the end, and I almost died, and that was like a week before I went to rehab. Or not rehab, I went to detox at the hospital. So yeah, I'll get to that right now. So I'm living this life for a long time, and I things were starting to, I was starting to get sloppier and sloppier. Like I almost got caught at 2 banks. I had the ID taken, and I actually tried to stay there and fight with them, saying it was me. And thank God I had my ex-boyfriend with me, who came in and was like, let's go, before the cops get here. And I left, and then we ended up getting evicted from that apartment we lived in, which was under someone else's name. And I actually went to court trying to fight it as that person. Like, that's how out of my mind I was. Like, I was truly believing I was these other people. And so, yeah, that's what I'm saying. The reckless behavior, it was going to catch up to me, and after we got evicted, we moved into this trap house in the Valley. That was a sketchy situation in the first place because of the way we were able to move in. It was this girl that was living there. God rest her soul. She ended up dying from an overdose a couple of years ago. But she was living there at the time, and her boyfriend was in jail, and a gang came in and took over her house. And then my ex-boyfriend, who was pretty well known in the San Fernando Valley, he was like one of the tough guys who was able to get things done. He went in with some of his friends and got the gangsters out of her house. So she was so grateful. She was like, you guys can live here. Pick whatever room you want. So we lived there for a little while, and, I never felt safe. There was people coming in and out of the house all the time. I had my brand new puppy there. She's a Bandit. She's a husky German Shepherd. And I was always afraid she was going to find someone's drugs and die. And it just wasn't a safe environment for a dog to live in. Or for a human to live in. But, Bandit got lost for 9 days while we were there. We ended up having to hire a pet detective to come find her. This lady came with greyhounds and sniffed her trail out and actually found her. It was crazy. But, so I lived there for maybe a year and a half. And I ended up getting into a really big thing with the law finally. All these other charges were fraud or identity theft here and there. One time I had a GTA, that was one of the bigger charges for me. And then what ended up happening this fateful day, which led me onto my journey of recovery, was I was going to Walgreens to get syringes, and I was driving a Hellcat. That was the car I had at the time, and it was all blacked out, murdered out, so stupid. Why would you cause attention to yourself like that? My windows were tinted, the front windshield was tinted, the lights were tinted, everything screamed look at me, I'm illegal.
Is it just the
The confidence that the drugs give you?
Yeah, I guess so. I just thought the car looked cool like that. But, and a smart person would be like, I want to fly under the radar, not cause attention to myself. Right. So yeah, I did. A lot of, people get sometimes paranoid on meth. I didn't get that way. I got like the opposite, overly confident. So I ended up going to Walgreens, and then I kind of like pulled to the side. I wasn't really in a parking spot, and I see these cops come in, and I'm like, oh God, they're looking at me. They're going to pull me over. So I backed into a spot real quick. I was going to try to jump out of my car and walk into Walgreens like, oh, don't bother me. I'm just going into the store. But I didn't even get that chance. I backed into the spot, and they pulled up in front of me, and they locked eyes with me, and they turned their lights on, and I'm just like, nope. And I turned my car on, and I just drove around them, and I just took off. So yeah, it became a high-speed chase. It didn't last very long. It was probably like 3 minutes, but it was scary. 2 months prior to that, I had gone in a high-speed chase with my ex in the car. I was driving, and he was telling me where to go, and it was in Marina, and we got away. So in my head, I'm like, I can do it again. But this time was way different. It was like in the daytime. It was on a weekend. It was in Arleta, which, do you know that Arleta? It's like a shitty part of San Fernando Valley.
I don't know it.
Oh, you never want to go there. It's just terrible.
I've heard of it.
Yeah. And then I just remember driving, and I didn't know where I was, and all these cops, every street I go, there's like another cop, another cop, another cop. I'm like, oh my God, I need to stop. This is bad. And I turned down like one dead end, and I'm like, it's a fucking dead end. So I turn around again. I almost like hit a cop car as I'm turning around. And I went like, this is the kind of person I was even in my addiction. I look at him, I go, sorry. Like, I'm like, sorry. Like I almost hit you. But I kept going. And at the end, I got away. Like there were no more cops behind me, and I pulled down another dead end. And so at this point, I'm like, I'm just going to stop. And I pulled into someone's driveway where you couldn't see my car from like the street. And I jumped out, and my car was full of evidence because I had just left that house in Marina, and I wasn't ready to take everything out and put it in the house in the valley because I didn't trust people there. So I just decided to drive with a bunch of illegal stuff instead. And I jumped out. I grabbed what I could. It was like a box of like IDs and credit cards, and I threw it in the trash, in these people's trash outside their house. And I look up, and there's just like a helicopter hovering. So I knew I was going to get caught. I just started walking casually away, and then the cops started pulling down the street. And the first one that came was like, hey, stop, and I'm like, what do you mean? I didn't do anything. And it's just like, stop or we're going to take you down. And I'm like, okay. I surrender. And I just went up to them, and I'm like, can I get let off with a warning? I was scared. I don't have a license. And they're just like, we'll talk about that at the station, So they took me in, and they charged me with reckless evading, and then I got bailed out from my partner at the time, and I went back to court 2 months later, and they're charging me with 18 felonies now from all the stuff that was in my car. They built a case. So I go home from the court date, and now I'm like in total despair. I'm like, I'm finally going to prison, and I just continued to use, and I tried to get another car while I was out on bail and in another county, and I get arrested again. I got set up by the dealership. They like figured it out right before, and they set me up. So I signed the papers, and the cops walked in, and I got bailed out once again. So now I'm back. Now I have 2 open court cases, one in LA County, one in San Bernardino, and I'm going to court. And I remember this court date very specifically because I believe it was when something came over me, and that was when I began to truly surrender. I didn't get sober that day, but what ended up happening was I go there, and my attorney comes outside, meets me outside. He goes, look, they're going to remand you when you go inside. I just want you to be prepared for that. They're going to put you in jail. They think you're a danger to the public. You were out on bail, you committed another crime, so they're gonna put you away, and you just want you to be prepared. And initially, my first thought was, I'm not gonna go to jail and, detox off heroin in jail. I'm gonna run. And I remember looking at my dad's face, and just the helplessness that overcame him was just like, it haunted me. And he's like, you're gonna run again? Like, that's all I've ever done is run, you know? And he just like looked at me, like begging me with his eyes, like, please don't do this again. And so that was the first time I surrendered, and I felt growth as an adult woman because I decided to go in no matter what. Even if they arrest me, I'm going in. And so I went in, and you know, the court ended up giving me house arrest. Thank God I didn't run, right? They would have just...
You're very lucky.
Yeah. So they're like, she is a danger to society, but we're going to put her on house arrest. That way she's not out committing crimes. So I go back to the house in the valley. I'm now on house arrest. And this is what I call the perfect storm, because all this stuff started happening at once. I experienced an overdose for my first time. I ended up drawing from... I was starting to do muscle shots in the morning because my veins were so shot out. I was shooting up in my neck. I had abscesses. I mean, I was literally in the hospital multiple times for staph infections. I was septic at one point. I almost died. I had like 104 temperature. You know, I was just falling apart physically. And so at the time I was making muscle shots, and you have to make those like double the strength to feel anything. And I didn't realize when I was drawing out of that spoon that it was a muscle shot, and I thought it was going to just be for the IV, you know? And so I OD'd. I didn't even get halfway through the needle, and my ex, who was walking out of the house, turned around for some reason. And thank God he did, because I wouldn't be sitting here if he hadn't. That's how bad the OD was. And he sees me, like, I get all, like, clenched up, and then I fall. I'm turning blue. He had to pry my mouth open because I was, like, seizing and, like, biting down on my tongue. And he pried my mouth open and started giving me CPR. And he found Narcan, gave me Narcan, called 911, you know, and I remember waking up to the ambulance, like I could hear them on the phone, the paramedics, and that scared the shit out of me because I had never OD'd. I wasn't one of those addicts that goes through like Narcan a bunch of times and I'm like, I'll keep going, you know. No, that was enough. I was like, I need to get sober. This is fucking real and I'm gonna die, you know. And I ended up 1 week later, I have a staph infection now in my foot again. And so I called my dad. I just called my dad out of nowhere before I could change my mind. And I was like, Dad, come pick me up. I need to go to the hospital. And he was over there in minutes. You know, he dropped everything he was doing that night and picked me up. And I went to a hospital where they put me on IV antibiotics for my foot. And while I was there, they detoxed me off the heroin and meth. So I didn't go to like traditional rehab for once or traditional detox. I actually just did it in a regular hospital. And then because I was in house arrest, I had to go back to a home. And now we were being evicted out of that trap house. So it was like the perfect storm. Everything happened at the right time for me to get sober. And my mom was like, look, you can come live with me as long as you stay sober. And she let me come move in with her. And that was the biggest blessing. You know, my mom was such a wonderful woman. She let my ex-boyfriend at the time go to rehab and move in with us as well. Like, she was a saint to deal with that. So... 19 months goes by. I'm on house arrest for 19 months. I can only leave for doctor appointments. And then I ended up getting approved to go to an outpatient for 6 months. They let me do that 3 times a week. So I started to really work on myself. I was very heavily into AA, but I could only do it on Zoom. And then I had these women come into my life through my AA sponsorship meeting that would just come to my house. They would bring meetings to me. They would pray over me before court. Like, they were just so wonderful. And I just started to build my community, you know, and you know, they say like the opposite of addiction is connection. Like, I truly believe that because if I didn't have that, you know, community around me, I don't think I would have lasted because it was such a stressful first 2 years. You know, very early on, while I'm on house arrest, my cousin dies from an overdose on my mom's side, my youngest cousin, and it was very unexpected. No one knew he was using. It was actually, I have an older cousin on that side who is in and out of rehab, right, for addiction. So it was very shocking when we find out the youngest one passed away, and, you know, I wasn't able to go to the funeral. I'm on house arrest. I just... Hearing my mom scream when she found that out, it haunts me. And then, so thank God I had people around me at that time to get through that. And then very shortly after that, I lose one of my childhood friends who she and I had just got reacquainted. She came over and she hung out with me, and then we made plans for the next weekend. She doesn't pick up her phone, and I find out from someone else that she died from suicide. So it was like I had these like major losses in the beginning, you know, and I had health scares that happened. Like the doctor thought I had a tumor. Then he thought I had a stroke. It was like one thing after another, and all these opportunities to really lean into God and lean into my faith and really believe that I was going to be okay no matter what. Okay, even if I had a stroke, I'm going to be okay. Even if there's a tumor, I'm going to be okay, you know? And all the while, I'm fighting this court case, not knowing what's going to happen, you know? So I definitely have grown my self-worth over those years. I know I'm a strong person. I didn't believe it for a while, but I guess after so many people have told me, I now believe it, you know, because I did go through a lot. And I, you know, my court case was it's just an unsettling feeling when you don't know what's going to happen. And I went in thinking it was going to be one way from my attorney, and we went in and the DA was like, look, this has gone on way too long. You need to take this deal or it's off the table. We're going to give you more time. And the deal was 32 months prison time. So I had to sign it. I was like, okay. I had to, and I remember like my mom and my dad and we just went back to my house and we were just like silent. Like, what can we say? We're like, okay, I guess I'm going to prison. It's not that long though, right? 32 months, I would do half time. But still, like when I'm 34 at the time, and I'm finally sober and actually wanting to stay sober and do the right thing, and I'm like gung-ho on sobriety and I'm ready to change my life. So thinking like I have to go to prison now and it's going to set me back more, it was devastating. Even if it was just going to be a year and a half total, you know, it was devastating. So I did everything I could in my power to prepare for that moment. I didn't use, I stayed sober. You know, I got through my steps very quickly. I wanted to get through my amends because I knew that's where the power laid in the amend process. And then I did other stuff to make myself feel ready to go. I ended up freezing my eggs because I was like, look, this is going to take time away as a woman. My biological clock is ticking. At least I'll feel better about this because I still haven't had any kids yet. So I did that. I just spent a lot of time with friends and family. And then I went to go turn myself in. And the most magical day happened at court. My attorney was just trying any last thing last minute to help me out. He goes, Your Honor, please at least give her credit for the house arrest that she's been on. Like, she's done 19 months of house arrest. Can you give her credit for that? And in the state of California, there's like a fine line where they don't have to give you credit. It was like, I don't really remember how to explain this, but my lawyer was trying to tell me like they don't have to, but they can if they want to, you know? And the DA was fighting against it. Like, no, she shouldn't get it. They were going back and forth. And I just remember sitting up there and I was so calm and I felt the presence of a higher power with me because there was no way I would normally feel calm in that moment. But I felt like I was in a true surrender. Like, no matter what's going to happen, I'm going to be okay at the end of the day. So I just remember them going back and forth. And then the judge actually stepped in on my behalf and said, no, I'm going to give it to her. He was like an angel, God sent. I think he saw how much I really changed and wanted to stay sober, and I wasn't like bullshitting. And I had a ton of people supporting me with letters, and he said, I'm going to give it to her. And so they multiplied it up, and he goes, it equals overtime served. So you're going straight to parole status. So I literally, I just remember hearing my mom sobbing in the background, and even my dad had tears in his eyes. My lawyer had tears in his eyes. My lawyer's known me since I was a kid because he was our family attorney. It was such a beautiful moment of what happens when you really just surrender and do the right thing no matter what. You know, if I had ran or if I had, gotten cold feet and just decided, to run, this wouldn't have happened. And I stayed sober through it all, and God blessed me. I think I was looked at as more of an asset on the outside than on the inside. So instead of going to jail and then prison that day, I walked out of the courtroom. They took my ankle monitor off, and my life just began. I felt like I had a reprieve in life, and part of me felt guilty, like I didn't deserve it, because I knew the harm that I had caused in my addiction. And I guess that's why, I was okay with going to prison, because I'm like, it's not like I didn't do this stuff. like, okay, I'm going to reap what I sow. But once again, I was granted a new chance at life, and I don't take that for granted anymore. And that was in November of 2023. February 2024, we opened up a sober living, myself and two partners, called Namaste. It was all women's, and that's been a beautiful blessing. I get to watch these women come in, and the light turn on in their eyes, and like I see them fall in love with like life again. I just love that because I get to like be involved with women on like a different, a different scope. Like I'm taking them to this event on Saturday called Daybreakers, which is like a sober day dance party. And then they have like cold plunges and saunas. And I just want them to see that life is so much fun and such an adventure when you're sober. Like when you're using, it's so small and like dark. Everything always looked dismal and gray, even like the sunniest day, everything just had like a dark undertone. And that truly just dissipates when you get sober, and yeah, it's been a wild ride. And I ended up getting arrested again for that other court case, the Rancho Cucamonga one, for the car. They had dropped it and then they had refiled. And once again, I leaned into God and I was like, okay, what's the lesson here? Am I going to have to go through court again? Is this going to be the same thing all over again? But God granted me again, and they put that in with my last court case, and they gave me time served. And then I got my probation restarted. But guess what? I got off my probation in 6 months instead of 3 years, because I just continued to put one foot in front of the other and do the right thing and really like be of service and trust in God. And I feel like one thing that's really helped me too is saying yes to things. When I was using, like I didn't want to experience life, and now if an opportunity presents itself and it's a little scary, I usually know I need to say yes, or it makes me uncomfortable, I need to say yes, because there's growth in that. Mm-hmm. And I always end up meeting the right person. And then like, look, if I hadn't said yes to meeting Fausto this one time and speaking at his event, I probably wouldn't be here right now.
That's right.
It's just like so many doors open from saying yes and just trying new things.
What's your biggest regret in all of this?
I used to say I regretted everything, like with using and stuff. But the times I would say that, it was because I was normally still in my addiction and I didn't have a life that was beautiful yet. Now, being on the other side, I can finally say I am okay with what happened. Do I not regret it? I'll never say I don't regret it, because it does bother me thinking like if I hadn't gone down this road, where my life might be today, what kind of career I could have. Would I have a bunch of children and a husband? Maybe, but I do believe those things will come. So I don't say I don't regret it anymore, but I'm okay with the way things went now, because I'm finally at a place where I feel grateful, where I am proud of the woman I am, and I couldn't say that before.
Let me ask you one last question, Jessy. What would you say is the most important lesson you've learned in your life?
The most important lesson? That it's okay to start over. Like, if I had let time and relapses and the amount of failures and guilt and shame overtake me, I would have never surrendered and gotten sober. So that's my biggest lesson. Like, no matter where you're at, it's never too late to have a beautiful life. You can always start over as long as you're alive, as long as you're here to take that opportunity. And I'm so grateful I didn't give up on myself. Yeah.
It's a beautiful story.
Thank you.
I'm glad you made it out.
Me too. My sobriety date is 4/26/22, most important day in my life.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
When I was designing the first Softwood Underbelly book, I realized that there were so many great portraits that weren't going to make it into that book. They just wouldn't fit. And once I saw how well that first book sold, I knew I'd have to design a second book. This second book is finally ready to ship. Like the first one, this book has a collection of some of the best portraits from Soft White Underbelly, accompanied by a quote from that person's interview. This book features another group of Rebecca portraits, as well as a collection of color images of the Whitaker family, and plenty of others. You can order yours for $125 or $150 for a signed copy at softwhiteunderbelly.org. Again, like the first book, once this book is sold out, I will not be printing more of them. The portraits are what Soft White Underbelly is all about, and these two books contain the best of all that work. Thank you for watching.